Welcome to Fostering Blooms, the podcast where we dig deep into gardening and all the ways it can enrich your home and life.
Together, we'll explore every aspect of gardening the organic way, keeping it simple, accessible, and fun.
Whether you're a seasoned gardener or just getting your hands in the dirt, we're here to share the tips and insights you need to grow something truly special. I'm Shannon Foster Boleen.
And I'm Caitlin Blum, and we're two friends on a mission to cultivate beauty, creativity, and connection through everything we grow.
This is Fostering Blooms.
This morning, I woke up more excited about soil than my mushroom coffee.
Why?
Because this is going to be a really good episode today.
You're right, it is.
We have a real treat.
Oh my God.
For our friends.
You know what? I'm not even going to pretend that I'm not fangirling. I'm not even going to act like, and I'm going to say it again. I'm going to tell her when she jumps on. I'm not even going to pretend.
All right. So who are we talking about? So this is part of our Inside the Influencer's Garden series.
Yes.
I wanted to say Inside the Galaxy, and that's not correct.
No, that's not right. It is Inside the Influencers Garden series.
Yes. And what is flourishing and evolving in 2025. And so we want to hear from voices out there that are big in gardening and homesteading, and what do they got going on? And hear what they have to say. What's going to be in? What's going to be out? Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah. And I think what I love is that she is real and down to the nitty gritty. Even though she has a huge following, she is totally relatable, accessible, wants to teach people, and genuinely real. It's not just for looks.
Yeah, we're sitting down with someone that I think really embodies the spirit of sustainability and self-sufficiency. This is my friend, Anne Briggs of Anne of all Trades.
I thought you were going to say Anne of Green Gables for a second.
She kind of is like Anne of Green Gables. We'll have to ask her if she's called herself that.
So without further ado, let's talk to Anne.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
Good. We're really excited to have Anne here today.
So exciting. I'm not even going to pretend that I'm not fangirling.
Not that right now. By the end of the episode, you'll know why you shouldn't be fangirling right now.
Just a cool human being all around. Anne of all Trades is here, and you're such a down-to-earth individual. You're always willing to, share the knowledge you have, and people like to grow with you, literally. You're learning in the garden, and you're sharing it with others. Anne does so many things.
Yeah.
Farming, milking, gardening, woodworking, craftsmanship. What don't you do, Anne?
These days, I do less than I do because I love doing all the things. I chose the right name, Anne of all Trades, for a reason, so that I could dabble in everything and have an excuse to do it. But now less is better, it turns out. You can't, as my grandpa used to say, are we allowed curse words on this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we did
You
clean,
can't half-ass. You have to whole-ass.
Yeah.
You can't half-ass a whole bunch of things. You have to whole-ass one thing. So
I love that.
these days we're digging real in. Oh, that's an accidental gardening pun already. Too late. Digging into soil health.
I already had it in there.
Oh, good.
Like it.
Great.
Oh, please pun it up.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, soil health. I've decided to become a grass farmer. That's that's the best way to describe what I do now. I'm obsessed with soil health, but that covers the garden, it covers the cows, it covers all that stuff. And then in my spare time, I do woodwork.
That's really cool. So I know that a lot of what you've done is considered homesteading, and some people that listen may not even know what that word means or what that encompasses. I think there might be some misperceptions about what it means as well. So can you kind of define for us what you see as homesteading and what you're doing?
Homesteading, I think, is a lazy way to fully encompass all the things, because frankly, you can homestead really well from a 1-bedroom apartment on a 6th floor thing, because a lot of the skills that you need to have to be able to homesteading, the term came from the Homesteading Act, which was basically before the whole US was fully developed, you could stake a claim on a certain amount of acreage. And back then, that kind of meant that you would have to learn all of the skills because you'd be the only person in a pretty large area. And
Mm.
aside from a general store or something like that, where you could get your basics like your sugar and your flour and those kinds of things, everything else relied on you and your local community. And so I think that it can be taken to any extreme, but so many of the skills that you need to know as a quote unquote homesteader, you can do in a tiny space or a big space, whatever you want to do. It's just basically, in my world at least, trying to learn how to do or source as much as you possibly can, as locally as you possibly can.
Thank you so much.
It's a really good way to put it.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely
it
it
is.
is. And like I think like you said too, there's different scales to homesteading and
Mhm.
the intensity with which you do it, going all in or like I feel like I'm a medium level homesteader.
Mhm.
I milk when I want to and I have a garden and
Mhm.
you can always do more, but
I think that there's too a sense of like community. When I met Kate, we didn't even know that we lived 6 minutes from each other. And we both have this incredible passion for gardening and bringing that into the home, whether it's how you cook or flower arranging and just the mental health and the physical benefits of it as well. Since we have like a little community now, a lot of my food compost I take over to her to use for her animals. I grow things that she's not going to plant in her garden. And so I think no matter how much we want to be self reliant, there's a lot of joy in kind of that shared community, like you said, of having those other people that especially if they're close by, that you can kind of bear the workload and the joy and the rewards together.
Oh, 100%. I actually just made a video about this that I was like, oh, this is too different than the kinds of things that I normally do, so no one's gonna like this. But it actually kind of blew up, and I'm really pleased it did because it was called The Lie of Modern Homesteading, which pointed directly at this mindset that we have to do everything ourselves. And I was like, listen, the first 10 years of my journey doing this stuff was me learning how to do all the things. And then, which leads me to where I was saying you can't half ass that many things. And it wasn't until I hit absolute rock bottom that I realized, you know what? This, even historically, we seem to have glossed over the fact that people did this stuff as a community. It wasn't ever about self. It was
Right.
about, like, even if you are a half day's horse ride or buggy ride away, there's things that you're going to be better at than me. And so, as much as we can learn to live in cooperation, the better. I mean, like, even the fact that I do dairy stuff now, I mean, I've been doing goat dairy for 12 years now, but getting into cow dairy was literally just because when we moved here 5 years ago, we moved across country from Seattle to Tennessee. And when we moved here, I specifically went around to the neighbors and I was like, what's missing in this community? Like, you guys are already doing so many awesome things. How can I fill a hole? And my friend Tyler, who's now become my best friend, and we now co own a dairy business together, she was like, I need help with my cows. And I was like, you've got it. I've never
Yeah.
had a cow, but if you teach me how to do cows, we'll do cows together until the day we die. My friendship with Tyler and the business that we've created has been my lifeblood for
Yeah.
so many reasons. And also, it turns out cows are really great.
yes, they
Oh,
are.
that's awesome. I feel that way about Kate. I mean, we don't have a business together yet, but we
Yeah,
have we have the business of a
that's
podcast.
right.
But I feel the same way like you. Sometimes you just meet those people where you have that connection and it really brings it home, that we're not meant to be alone and we all have these gifts and skills we should share with each other.
I farmed, garden, all that. And then we had Baylor
Mhm.
and I didn't have as much time as I wanted. I kind of, God, there's a lot of weeds out there. Then I met Shannon and I was like, you know what? She re-inspired me to, get back in the garden. And I have a little bit more time now. And I have a little farmhand on his little John Deere tractor carrying our tools. I think it's that sense of community that I'm not alone. I'm not doing it alone.
Yeah.
That kind of got me back into
And it,
to
it
it.
and it goes with accessibility, which I think is what you also talked about just a minute ago, is that you mentioned something that I think is a huge misconception it was for me, is that if you're going to homestead, you need land, you need a lot of space, you need a lot of things, you need a lot of skills. You're probably a prepper, all of these things that kind of go with that. A lot of people, they may not be a homeowner, or even if they are a new homeowner, they may be intimidated just to take care of their yard. So,
Yeah.
what would your advice be to someone that has this desire to be part of this movement of learning and growing and doing that, and they're just getting started, what would you tell them?
Start with what you've got, where you're at right now. Because the thing is that so many of these skills, I alluded to this earlier, but actually, my whole obsession with all this stuff started when I lived in the middle of Taipei, Taiwan, in a six-floor apartment. And all my neighbors were growing food on their balconies and in their windowsills. And they were, like baking and doing all this stuff that, I mean, like we had chickens on our rooftop. You can do way more, I think, than what
Mhm.
people tend to just assume that you can do, because it's that mindset of, oh, I've got to wait until I've got an acre or 3 acres or 20 or 100 acres, like, and then I'll start. But if you have that mindset of, I'm going to wait until, to be totally honest, statistically, you're never going to do it at all. And if you do somehow miraculously fall into that place of having land, if you haven't already started where you're at and started to learn some of these skills that all build upon one another, you're going to be screwed. I mean, for lack of a better term, because the thing is, you can learn how to, if you have an oven, you can learn how to bake bread right now. And by the way, it doesn't have to be sourdough. Sourdough, like it's like
What?
so
That's
many
all the
of,
rage.
I do love
I
sourdough.
mean, it is so popular right now. But the thing is that, like, all you really need to make bread is you need flour, you need water, you need yeast, and you need a little bit of sugar. If you put those ingredients together and then put it in your oven, something will happen. It might not be the best thing ever, but also the way you learn things is not by reading 10 million recipes and watching all the videos and making sure that you have everything right to even be able to start. It's you start, you screw it up, and you learn more from screwing it up once than you could ever learn from 100 books or anything else. And so, like, yeah, you just got to. This is another grandpaism, which my grandpa was the best. And so I quote him all the time. But yeah, use what you got, where you're at, and get started today. Do a small version of it and be fine with screwing it up, because the reality is, like, no one else is watching, no one else cares. In
Right?
Anyone else?
fact, I mean, my lifelong goal of getting on America's Funniest Home Videos by massively screwing up while I'm filming something, like, you gotta be ready to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and be
And
okay with that and
abs-
Yeah.
secure in yourself.
well, we talk about killing plants all the time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
in
Oh
fact, I
yeah.
was at the doctor the other day and this nurse said, "Oh, I've got a black thumb. I can kill a cactus basically." And I was like, "I guarantee you I've killed you more plants than you have." Like I
Yeah.
I've
garden,
killed
but I killed
cactuses.
so many things.
Probably
Like,
killed like 4
yeah,
cactuses.
and I've
I
definitely
had cactuses when I lived in Taiwan. Let me just tell you, none of them are still here with me today.
I love that though, because I do feel like a lot of times, especially in gardening, it feels so unapproachable and like
Yeah.
you have to do everything perfect or this plant's not going to thrive. And we very much talk about, I call it the, I just had a lot of luck and stopped giving a, you know what. So with it
Oh,
rhymes
ooh,
with
I
luck.
like that one.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, my
That's good.
delphiniums are a perfect example of that. I literally left them outside. Nothing happened. I ignored them. They stayed in a tray. Then
And then we
anyways,
we forgot what the seed was.
yeah, I literally am like, I think this is delphinium, and now I have 145 seedlings.
there you go.
Nature will do its thing, which leads me to a great question that Kate put together about being a lazy gardener, because we have a whole podcast on that, and that's your thing too. So, what is a lazy gardener for you, and how does that tie into what you're trying to do with maybe soil health as well?
Oh yeah, I kind of stumbled into the lazy gardening thing mostly because I come from a marketing background.
Okay.
And also, I am the laziest gardener ever. Like, your story about the delphiniums is classic. I used to literally just take all my old seed packets, dump them together, and then broadcast seed them around. And
Yeah,
then
I
I would,
like
like, as they came up, whatever random things, I would use my Google plant identifier and be like, oh, that's what that is. Cool. Well,
Right.
great. But with that, I stumbled on this lazy gardening idea mostly because I really wanted to appeal to the people that are not, like, that don't self-identify as lazy. Because frankly, sorry to tell you, if you are actually lazy, I don't really have a lot for you.
Right.
But all of us are busy. I mean, I work full time, I farm in the margins. Like, we only have what we have. And the thing is, gardening is great. Like, I love growing my own food and things like that. But ironically, I love always saying that I like to feed my cows vegetables so that I can eat something that tastes better. But in that, I do, obviously we grow a garden too, but my focus is 100% on how can I get the maximum yield for the minimum input of my time, of my money, of my effort. And frankly, all of that comes down to soil health because, again, just coming from the corporate world, I think about time management and productivity stuff. And as I was thinking about, man, the compounding nature of time, these 30-minute or 15-minute things that we do every day in the garden, those compound over time. And
Yes.
so how many of those things that we're doing do we actually need to be doing? And how could we minimize, remove them entirely? Again, all with the idea of making gardening and all this stuff more approachable. Because here's the thing. Ironically, we met on social media. And you have such a beautiful, beautiful online presence. And it's so inspiring. And it's like one of those aesthetics that just makes me want to live that life. But
Oh,
also, like, the danger of social media is that it's become like almost this like secret cult of curation that makes
yeah.
everything seem so inaccessible. Like, oh, I have this secret knowledge. Well, I hate to tell you, it's literally you put some seeds in the ground, you add some dirt, you add some water. It's just like the bread, your first time
Yeah.
making bread.
Yep.
You put something in and you see what happens and you learn from it. But the reality is, the healthier your soil is, the easier it is all around. The fewer compounding chores you have to do, because if you can get to where you have healthy soil, you'll grow plants that are healthier, more disease resistant, have better root systems that will be able to go down in search of water. So you don't have to water as often because they have better root systems, because they have better access to nutrients. The doubling power of the sun will help them to outcompete other weeds and things like that. So all of a sudden, you don't have to water, you don't have to weed. And you've got plants that also are absorbing all that good stuff so that you or whoever eats them gets the maximum yield from the plant itself. And so there is no secret skills, no magic pill that you can pay someone 10.99 for a course to be able to unlock. It's seeds in the ground plus dirt plus water plus sun.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. One of the things that I see on social media too is a lot of times we see the end result, but not the important stuff that happens to get there because it's not as sexy as seeing
Mm-hmm.
the flower that you want to consume or the vegetable you want to consume. I would rather garden organically and have a smaller shallot. Like I see these shallots in the grocery store that are the size of my fist, and I'm like, what did you put into this thing? I feel like that what you talked about with soil health applies to flowers as well. You pack it in, you have good soil, you don't weed as much, and it's not a secret. Sorry, I just rambled on a tangent, but that's really exciting. I
You're
love that.
apologizing for going on a tangent. How long
Oh,
was my answer to your one sentence question?
We want the
yeah.
goodies.
Give us the goods.
But you could say that.
What actually makes healthy soil?
What are
Yeah.
we putting in it? There's so many ways to go about it. There's the no dig, which is really what you embody. And I want to talk about lack of crop rotation, but let's get down to like,
The nitty gritty.
here's the
What's the
ground. Here's the
recipe?
flat clay ground. So you were outside of Nashville.
Yep.
And we were in Knoxville, Tennessee. Well, Friendsville, but Knoxville.
Look, you
Zones,
found friends in the Ville.
We did become friends of the friends. I mean, come
friends
on.
in the Ville. We're all in
7B.
zone 7B. So I think that helps too in the context of what we're talking about in our growing season and
Yeah.
everything. So you got the flat ground.
The
We got
clay.
that clay. What are we like? Let's layer it up. What are we putting on this?
Yes, I love that. So the thing is, the basic premise of lazy gardening is look at something that works that no one has to take care of and replicate it. So we live, in zone 7B, take a little walk in the woods. Is anyone weeding, watering, planting, fertilizing? No. No,
Blowing
I
me.
mean, it's all taking care of itself out there. And so with that, I was like, okay, well, what happens in the forest that makes it a garden that takes care of itself? And more importantly, what happens at the edges of a forest? Because if you go into the actual forest, like into the woods, I don't know why I did that voice. I'm regretting it already.
No,
But
I
anyway,
really liked it.
if you go into the woods, you're going to see big tall trees and not much else. But if you go near the forest edges, you're going to see all these different layers, these shelves that are all kinds of different plants. I mean, at the ground level, you've got maybe some pasture grasses, maybe some wildflowers, and then up above that, you've got some bushes like blueberries and blackberries and things like that. And then behind that, you've got some taller bushes. And then behind those, you've got, like little sapling trees. And then behind those, then you've got the big trees. But what's happening with all of that stuff to make it work without any inputs of any kind? And the reality is, when things die, they fall and then they get left in place. And that's it.
Yeah.
So when we came here, our farm was solid clay. There were a few weeds. We had lots of thistles, dandelions, and cockleburrs and things like that. But basically, you had huge patches of bare clay.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was like, man, well, this is a great blank canvas. But the thing is that truly, I was like, okay, so what do we have to do? We basically bring in organic matter in the form of anything we can find and put it on top of the clay. And again, because I'm a huge science nerd, I knew I was willing to make the risk of the labor at first to bring all that stuff in because I knew what was going to happen. Because I've seen it happen before. I mean, I've been doing garden coaching and helping people with this for a very long time. I was like, let's see how fast I can make that happen here. The first year, I grew an enormous amount of produce just on top of that clay simply by putting a ton of leaves. I just literally like went around to our neighbors because ironically we do live in Nashville. It looks like we're like in the middle of nowhere, but we have lots of neighbors. So I went around. I'm like, hey, can I leaf blow for you and then take the leaves away?
Can I ask you one question about
Yeah.
these leaves you collected? After you got these leaves, did you like mow them or break them down in any way, or did you just like plop them on
She's
top?
lazy.
I'm lazy.
Because
But here's the thing, that is
Kidding.
actually
Go
a
ahead.
fantastic question because this is a big issue that a lot of people have. I'll say this right now. The way we do it here is it's basically lasagna, but I don't want to get you stuck in the lasagna because lasagna gardening is also a thing, but it's not quite like this. But we'll just use the lasagna thing because I had lasagna for dinner last night. It's my favorite food and I kind of want more for breakfast. But with that, I laid down cardboard first, just right on top of that clay, laid down a whole bunch of layers of cardboard. Pro tip, you can go to your local grocery store or even better, a furniture store, and they will give you all the cardboard you could possibly want free of charge. They're stoked because they don't have to pay to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But laid down probably like 3 to 6 layers of cardboard. Then I called all the electric companies and I was like, hey, who trims your trees? Who comes through after the tornadoes and everything else? I called probably 15 different companies. There's actually a website. It's called chipdrop.com. And if you do live in an area where chipdrop actually works, it's a fantastic service. You can sign up for it and like they'll do the work of calling the power companies and all that stuff for you. But for some reason in Tennessee, I mean, I've signed up probably 16 times since we've been here. I've not gotten a single chip drop from Chip Drop. All that to say, not sponsored. I was like, hey, when you guys are in the area, actually, when y'all are in the area, would you mind to just drop all of your chips at my house? And they were like, oh, heck yeah, we will. So ironically, then I got in a little over my head because I didn't have a tractor back then. And they didn't just, drop a little bit of chips. They dropped like 20 semi trucks worth of chips. I was like, oh
Careful
boy,
what you
howdy,
ask
my
for.
wheelbarrow and I are going to be real busy. Um, Real busy. Anyway,
No.
oh gosh. So I laid down the cardboard, laid down the wood chips, put tons of leaves on top of the wood chips, put down more wood chips. Found out that, by the way, if anyone can actually hear my baby goats crying in the background, I'm sorry and you're welcome, but they're like, excuse me, we can hear your voice and we'd like you to milk, please. That's them. Don't worry, it's not, a neglected child, just a
Oh,
neglected
that's
kid.
great.
Oh, more animal puns. Okay. So yeah, clay, cardboard, wood chips, leaves, more wood chips. My neighbor fishes gar, which I didn't
Okay.
even know what that was, but he does the archery fishing out of boats to help with the invasive grass carp. So he had tons of dead fish on a regular basis. I
Oh
called
my
him and I was like,
God.
could you please drop off some dead fish for me? put some of that in the layers, covered that up with more wood chips, more leaves, any animal poopies I could find around the farm, put those into the mix as
Okay.
well.
Okay. Okay. So bunny poop, safe to put right on the garden. Not going to
Totes.
burn your stuff. What do you think about goat poop?
Alpaca poop and goat poop can also go straight onto the garden. But here's the thing, even with bunny poop that you put straight onto the garden, like obviously don't put cat poop on your garden or dog poop, because anything that eats meat or anything else, that poop needs to be composted very differently, which you absolutely can compost it. We can talk about that in another video. All that to say that even bunny poop, yes, you can directly add it to your plants, just like you can with goat poop and alpaca poop. The food of ruminants with multiple stomachs can be added right in to your garden without too many negative detriments. However, I actually am a huge proponent of composting everything just a little bit before you put it onto your garden for so many reasons. Because even if you're composting yourself, aging anything a little bit before you put it onto the garden is going to help save you from a myriad of accidental gardening sins. So, for example, if you put bunny poop right onto your garden that's not been composted at all, what you're doing is you're giving your garden a little nitrogen bomb, which is really, really great for something. If you're growing leafy greens,
Yeah.
if you're growing rhubarb, which is ironically kind of hard to grow here because we have such a warm climate, but I love rhubarb.
I got some seedlings to start and they're out there hardening off right now. I'm so excited now if I can just not kill them when I plant them.
You should see her rhubarb plant. It's pretty wicked.
Okay, we'll talk about that later, but I'm very
Oh,
excited.
yeah, I'm a big fan of rhubarb. And there's lots of things you can do. The real problem here for rhubarb and other long-term root vegetables is actually moles and voles and gophers and all those things like that, which is really annoying because you get this plant established and then you're like 2 years later, yes, it's finally ready. What? It's gone. Anyway, that's a whole nother emotional journey we'll go through later. But all that to say that when you're putting a nitrogen bomb right on your leafy greens, that's going to help a ton because they love nitrogen and it will actually really help them grow huge. So if you're growing lettuce, great, sprinkle some bunny poo on there, pick it right fresh out of the garden and don't even bother washing it. This is also gut health 101.
Okay.
Kidding. But yeah, that's going to be great. However, you put that same bunny poop right on your garden, you try to plant some carrots in it, you're going to be so pumped because your carrot greens are going to be like so bushy and you are going to be like, oh my gosh, this crop of carrots is going to be amazing. And then you're going to pull out the saddest, shortest little disappointments you've ever had.
I've definitely done that.
Yeah, because they had too much nitrogen, but not enough phosphorus and other things that rooting vegetables really, really need. And so with that, you can get away with so many things. And again, this all comes down to experimentation. But, another great example is potatoes. People, for whatever reason, love to dump poop right onto their potatoes. And I'm like, well, great. You're going to grow like a 7-foot tall potato plant. And then you're just going to have like the world's tiniest little frying potatoes, like 7 of them underneath your 7-foot plant. And so you've just wasted a whole ton of garden energy and time into something that's not going to produce the roots that you really want. Alternatively, the same effect for tomatoes, but the problem is they're not going to fruit the way that you actually want them to. And so the benefit of composting things, which basically I have a fail-proof way to compost. It's called Beginner's Guide to Compost. You can find it on my YouTube channel. This is the only self-promotion I'm going to do, but it's only because thanks to my friend who's a scientist who helped me make that video, it just takes all of the mystery away from composting. And I love that because it's literally just you build a little house for your poop. You build a little carbon house for your poop or your greens or whatever else. And you put that stuff inside of these layers of carbon and then you end up with balanced compost. And that's what you really need for your garden to be able to actually get consistent results for all of your plants, especially if you're gardening in a small space. This is really important because you're going to plant a whole bunch of different kinds of plants in one little area. And if you put a bunch of bunny poop on top for your leafy greens, well, sad news for your carrots and your other rooting vegetables and your fruiting vegetables. Those are going to really struggle in that same little garden space. And as a lazy gardener, I'm a big fan of mimicking what's going on at the garden edges. So I interplant all of my different plants together. And so again, I want to make sure that I have the most balanced starting system for them possible. And so, yes, you can use goat poop. Yes, you can use alpaca poop. Yes, you can use bunny poop. It's not going to hurt anything if you put it straight onto your garden, but it will benefit greatly from composting. And here's the other cool thing about the composting video that I was talking about. You can create finished compost in 18 days.
I'm going to stop you because I'm going to tell you right now that not only we're going to watch the video, we're going to record the experiment, and I'm going to do it because we did a gardening goals podcast earlier this year. And one of my goals was to get my compost the way that I really have always wanted it to be.
Oh,
I've
great.
never had it the way I really, really want it to be. So this is going to happen.
We're
And
both-
we're going to
great.
report
gonna
back
do
to
it.
you. We're going to report back to
Yeah.
you.
I love that. And I hope that it goes well. And also, I really want to like hear your feedback. If you have any problems, let me know, because
I
those are the
will.
kinds of things that I want to fix the advice in the videos and things like that. But
Yeah.
then my other best advice is, so I'm a huge nerd. I read, like organic chemistry stuff just for fun,
Okay,
because
that's
it
me.
is fun for me.
Okay.
But I realize that everyone is not like that. And so my other pro tip that I'm super excited about is really good soil tests beyond just your former goldfish tank pH tests, which frankly don't actually tell you anything, because I can grow healthy plants in all kinds of different pHs. So that's my little brag point for that. But the reality is that what you really need to know in a soil test used to be scientifically like just totally inaccessible for most people, because if you did get like a Malic 3 soil test, it would show up as a bunch of technical garbage that it would be so hard for you to interpret. Well, now Redmond Homesteader has a $30 soil test that literally arrives in a self-addressed stamped envelope, which is amazing, with the postage and everything in it. And it tells you exactly how to collect a soil sample from your compost pile or from your garden or whatever else. And you take a picture of the QR code on your phone, you put it back in the mailbox, you send it in, and a week later, they email you your results. And your results come to you in a very readable format. And also with a, hey, we're not trying to sell you a bunch of stuff, but here's what you need to add to your garden to make it balanced. It's worth it. I used to tell people not to test their soil, because I would then tell them, hey, just study the weeds or study your plants that are growing in your garden. And that's going to actually tell you exactly what's happening in your soil anyway. But the problem for that is that advice is in and of itself a barrier to entry for a lot of people, because
They might not know what those weeds are. What's going
they
on?
might, and also it's just like that also requires you to study things for an entire season. And that's not the quick fix pill we like for our society today.
Yeah, they're excited to start growing.
Yeah.
And I think that's
great tip.
That's amazing. I'm definitely going to do that. I bought like a home soil testing kit and it was $40, and it's not that great. I wanted it to be better than it was. So I'm definitely going to try this.
Instantaneous though, that's the thing. Is the kit you got is we can test my soil, we can test over here and test over there, and you get the results. But you're right, you're not getting that,
Quality
here's what you're going to do to fix it. People are not only
Totally.
getting the answer but a solution. So
Yeah.
that's great.
It's foundational. It really
Yeah.
is.
But the funny thing is, so I actually use those soil tests more honestly on my compost than even in my garden. Because again, 12 years in, I'm pretty good at knowing what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I probably have 30 or 40 different composting experiments currently going on, literally just because this stuff really, really fascinates me. And so I'm so interested in the data behind the results of this combination plus this combination plus this combination. What does it yield and why? And so with that, I'm using those soil tests on my compost pile, literally just so that I'm like, okay, I know exactly what I'm putting on my garden. And so I know exactly what's going to happen, which is great.
Oh my God, I love this so much. And I love that you're experimenting, because I think that's another thing that's really scary for people is, we want to follow the directions, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to experiment because sometimes that experiment, you may not have the money to take that loss. You know what I mean? Like if you experiment
Totally.
with a plant or whatever, but there are some safe ways to do experiments, and having two different compost piles with different things is a safe way to do that without a lot of risk. But yeah, that's amazing.
Today, we've been able to scratch the surface of
Yeah.
your knowledge on a lot of they're probably already listening to you. But if you're not, you need to go go listen to
Anna.
Anne of all trades. I was listening to some videos and I was like, bam, God, yes, girl.
The couple that I would recommend people start with is there's for practical advice. The compost beginner's guide to compost is definitely one. And then the other one is start a lazy garden from scratch. It's a 37-minute video that gives you the exact recipe for that. But then there's also, if you're interested at all in the science behind it, I go into the forest and I show you exactly what I'm talking about with all that stuff in this 3 ingredients to fix your soil video. And I do talk about the soil tests in that video as well. But those are where I'd start if you're getting started because it's again, so side note to the side note to the side notes, who knows what tangent we're even on at this point.
Oh, I
But when I
remember. We're going to go back to your
Wood chips.
wood chips and
Yeah,
your
yeah.
good,
Go
good.
ahead.
But when I started gardening, it wasn't because, just had all this free time and just wanted another hobby. It's because at that time we were really, really strapped financially and most of our food was coming from the food bank. And I wanted to just have a little bit more food security. And so in that, I try really hard to give people the easiest, cheapest, like, how do we do this without spending a bunch of money? The book, The $64 Tomato, that basically goes through and talks about how someone starts their own garden so that they can grow a tomato that they realize that they spent $64 on, is kind of the same journey that so many people that think that they're going to save money on chickens and end up spending like $1,600 on a dozen eggs do. And that's because I didn't have anything when I got started. I had to use nothing.
Yeah.
And that's the joy of all of this, is that when you're looking at what works without human inputs, you don't have to think about, man, I'm risking so much. I talk a lot about, I mean, you just said you're worried about ruining a plant that you spent money on. Those, like, when there is money involved, for so many of us, the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm most passionate about is removing those barriers. Like, how can we lower those stakes so that you can experiment more? The more experiments you do, the lower risk that one of them fails and the higher reward when one of them succeeds.
Absolutely.
Granted, that's speaking from a place of having space to do experiments, but you don't have to have money to do experiments. I mean, hilariously, for a long time, before I had pigs and chickens and stuff, I would go use the leftovers from the food bank and I would compost that with my free wood chips.
Mhm.
And there's how I made my garden soil.
I love
So,
that.
For a lot of people, there's food insecurity, but there's also just the fact that so much of their income now is going to food because food prices have gone up so much in the last couple of years. And I actually did some research on this. Tennessee is one of the worst hit places because it's not just that the food price went up so much, it's the proportion of income that people are having to spend on food has gone up so much. So
yep.
if there's a way for us to get the word out, so to speak, not that we're the only ones because other people have been doing this, but get the word out that essentially you can grow your own things successfully in small spaces, in whatever space you have, without a lot of money. If it's something that you want to do, you can do that. Because even me, I'm mad. I don't want to pay $7 for a bag of organic black beans. I'm gonna grow my own. Like I'm growing
Yeah.
A
a
lot.
lot of beans this year.
She's
Yeah.
the bean bitch.
We'll see how that goes. Yeah.
It's going to go great. And
So-
yeah, call me anytime if you have any questions. Not that I would toot my own horn and say I'm the expert, but like
Oh,
anything
yeah.
I can do to help. We
Yeah.
grow lots of beans here too, which goes back into your question about plant rotation, which we don't even have to get into if we don't want to.
Okay,
But
well, let's go back to where I interrupted you with the poop question, which, because we love talking about poop, we really do, is you were fixing the soil basically. So you were at layers of wood chips and leaves that were just plain old leaves. You didn't break them down. You got the wood chips that weren't
yeah,
composted, so to speak. They were fresh. And then what happened?
and then I just put whatever else, animal manure, fish, and grass clippings,
Okay.
anything that might smell bad. You cover it up with more carbon, which more carbon is a fancy way of saying leaves and or wood chips. And you asked earlier about, do I break up the leaves? And that's a really, really good question. It's also what led me to talking about cardboard, which then we got on 17 more tangents. But welcome to, again, the inside of my brain.
Yeah.
But if you've ever mowed your lawn and then you didn't empty the little hopper behind the lawnmower and then it rained and
Oh,
then you got the most putrid,
Yeah.
awful concoction growing in that bag. Actually, what has happened there is you've created an anaerobic, an airless environment because those grass clippings, they've been clipped up, they've been chopped up, and they're really, really small. And so they're all touching each other, which makes it hard for air to get involved. This is why I really love using wood chips in between the layers. And that's because wood chips are kind of big and
Right.
they're different size and they're like chunky. And so if you put wood chips, then leaves, like if you're not careful, leaves, just like cardboard or anything else, are going to get wet and they're going to compress and they're going to create an anaerobic, airless environment, basically kind of just like a little roof that
Mm-hmm.
keeps the rain off of the other stuff below and then makes everything else below also get really putrid instead of actually composting and breaking down. So the reason why I mix wood chips into all of those layers is that you have less of a risk of things squishing together really, really tightly and then becoming anaerobic, which again, just is a fancy way of saying like it makes a little seal.
I gotta ask you, so if you put a layer of leaves, would you do just like a straight layer of leaves and then put wood chips on top of it, or are you like literally mixing the wood chips in with the leaves?
Again, I'm being pretty lazy about it. Mostly, I just kind of just like shake them in together. I'm not going to be intentional about, getting a perfect mix or anything like
That's
that.
what I
I'll have
meant
a
to.
giant pile of leaves or a giant bag of leaves and I'll sprinkle some in or fork some in with the pitchfork and then I'll fork
Wood
some
chips
wood
then.
chips in with them.
Right.
At some point, you're going to
Mhm.
go in and rake through it or walk through it or do like all these other things that'll end up mixing it a little bit
Mhm.
anyway. I'm not really about tilling for lots of reasons that we don't even have to get into, but the biggest one is that tilling is great once. If you're starting with an absolute hard pan clay or just an awful thing to start with, if you till once, it's fine, but I would till, then put cardboard, then put wood chips, then put leaves, then put wood chips, then put some compost or some rotting dead things and some poop and some other things, and then more wood chips and things like that, and then let that stuff break down for a season or two and then come in and put some seeds in and see what happens. I also think it's important to mention that this works really, really well here in 7B because of what our climate is like. We have a lot of humidity here. Stuff breaks down here so fast. We do have that advantage. I've lived in desert climates before where it takes a lot longer for things to break down. People have written in the comment section, my cardboard from 5 years ago is still there. I'm like, that's
Well,
incredible.
yeah.
Also great because you don't have to put it down every year. But I would say that means that you're also not keeping your system
What?
moist enough
Mhm.
for things to actually survive. And so the thing about lazy gardening that I talk about is that at some point you have to really, really saturate your system
Mhm.
for long enough for the system to start working for you. And then after that, it'll start taking care of itself. It'll hold its moisture in on its own, even in desert or arid climates. Once you've gotten the system kickstarted, eventually you'll, if not completely eliminate all of your watering and weeding needs and things, you'll so massively reduce it. But the big thing is you have to kickstart the system by fully, fully saturating it long enough for all of the microbes, all of the funguses, and all of the other things that, again, are the layers. We walk into the forest
Yeah.
and look at that garden that takes care of itself. We'll see all of these little white hairs in the leaves, and that's mycelium, it's mushroom roots. We'll see the soil, it looks like it's been tilled because it's so
Right.
uncompacted and everything. And the reality is, it's because of all these tiny little bugs, sorry to tell you, that are going in there and pooping all over the place and making these little tunnels and everything like that. All that stuff is happening without us ever having to lift a finger in the forest. And so we want to recreate that environment in our gardens. And a lot of that has to do with when there's already a ton of roots in the soil, a lot less water will run off like it
Right.
does off of a hard clay pan.
Mhm.
If there's already microbes and stuff in there, there's better water penetration into the soil when it rains. If there's leaves and mulch on top, all carbon, all wood sources are basically like tiny little sponges that
Mhm.
hold the water in the soil. All this to say, there's so many layers, pun intended, to
Yeah.
all of this. But the big thing is, if you were to boil down all of the lazy gardening stuff into one thing, it's never leave your dirt uncovered.
Yeah.
Mama Nature does not like to be naked in public.
Mm-mm.
Mama Nature.
If you're gonna uncover her, make sure you go ahead and cover her back up. And by that, you can use straw, you can use leaves, You can use wood chips. You can use sawdust. You can use newspaper clippings. You could get a paper shredder and shred your junk mail.
That's a great idea too. You make so many good points. There's so many I want to touch on, but I do want to go back to the wood chips. For me, it feels like that's something that's not as accessible, but I keep telling Shannon I need to call the power company so I can get
Yeah.
some free wood chips. I need to do that because I scavenge leaves from the forest. We're cardboard hoarders.
Yeah, we are.
We save it for each other, depending on what beds we got going on. And so
I have a whole forest that borders our, like, it's on our property. So I have a lot of leaves. I have access to a lot of leaves
Excellent.
without going down in there. I was going to ask you, how long did you have to wait to plant into that? Because I know that raw wood chips can be not good to plant into because of the composition of them. So how long did you have to wait before you actually planted into that soil?
Yeah, well, and the answer is, it's spring now. We want to get planting right now. And so the quick answer to that, and I'm so glad you brought it up, is that you can actually create a system that you can plant right into. What you do is you do all those layers, and then you would either buy or make. Again, I have a thing that'll show you how to do 18-day compost. So even here, we've still got 18 days. We can make some compost that is just only going to improve over the season as it's been in the garden bed. But on top of all of those layers, we'll put a layer of compost, and then we'll cover that up with what I call screen mulch, which is a fancy way of saying that I have some chicken wire around a frame, and I fork my mulch into it and I shake it. It's actually not chicken wire. It's 1/4-inch hardware cloth.
Yeah.
Then I shake my mulch over it, and then the bigger pieces of mulch go into the garden pathways, and the screened mulch, the littler pieces of mulch, then go on top of the garden beds. And for some seeds to be able to germinate them, if you're doing them in the garden itself, you sometimes even still have to rake that top layer of mulch back to let the seeds germinate, because you've got 1/4-inch squares of mulchy things, which are great for keeping moisture on the soil.
Yeah.
But they might be hard for a little carrot or lettuce seed to poke right up through, or whatever flower seeds you're putting in the garden. And so in that, sometimes you have to rake that back while you're germinating. And then as soon as the seeds have germinated, you take that screened mulch and you spread it over them again, so that, again, we're never leaving Mama Nature uncovered. But yeah, you can plant in it right away. It's just that at that second to top layer, you need to have about 1.5 inches. Again, if you think about what you're planting in it, how deep are the roots going to want to go, and how quickly are those roots going to be established? Because here's the fun thing about it. As long as you've got a way to keep those top layers moist, again, this is where in 7B we're like kind of have a head start because it rains so much here. In a more arid climate, you're going to have more danger of those wood chips below drying out. Then you'd end up kind of doing the opposite of what you need to have happen. But here we can get a head start with our high humidity and rain. And in that, our system's not really at risk, especially during the spring season, of getting undersaturated. And then during that time, so much of those lower layers are going to actually break down as those roots grow and get deeper and deeper. They're going to have so much other growing medium to go into. You did allude to a really big misunderstanding when it comes to wood chips and stealing nitrogen. Wood chips need nitrogen to be able to break down. So they can, yes, borrow nitrogen. But the funny thing is, as soon as they've used what they need, which is just for the first stage of decomposition, they release it right back to where they are. So in fact, especially if you're starting with fresher compost, or if you're putting bunny poo or goat poo or alpaca poo right onto your garden, wood chips are actually your greatest possible asset, because they will temporarily borrow that nitrogen to use it to break down. But then you've got a little slow release sponge in your garden that's going to slowly release it back in. So that's actually going to save your plants from having that nitrogen bomb that we really don't want them to have. In all of that, the forest really knows what it's doing. When a tree dies, it falls in place and it decomposes. That's the start of this whole system working. Is you've got wood matter that decomposes, you've got animals that die in the forest, and then their bodies get eaten by insects, and those insects take their little meat poops and poop them out elsewhere. You've got animals pooping in the forest. You've got birds pooping in the forest. Every time a leaf falls, it just decomposes in place while it holds moisture in the soil, and on we go.
That was
Nature's
just,
so
you were just
amazing.
speaking just pure soil glory.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes so much sense. I think when you break it down that way, it feels
Oh
more
my God.
obtainable. Like, I can do that and it makes sense why it works.
Mhm.
And God, I love it. We're literally hanging up and we're going to.
Start composting.
I wanted to ask about crop rotation. I think we're spending too much time on this. And here's why. There's kind of two parts to this. One, you have kind of debunked crop rotation and growing the same crops in the same place year after year is okay. You
It is
know,
okay with the caveat that you have to have healthy soil
to do
to
that.
start. The science behind crop rotation basically started once we started regularly tilling and removing all of nature's natural ecosystem from the soil. We were basically just planting the same four things over and over and over in the same spot, and it basically just robbed the soil of everything that it needed. When you are doing things like the forest does, I mean, shoot, we have a whole forest. It's not a monocrop for sure, but we've got a whole forest of black hickory back there.
Mhm.
And yet it's all those hickory trees have been growing there for 50 years. So how
Why
does
can't
that
we do
work?
that?
Why can't we do that? And the reality is we can. It's just that what we want to do to make that possible is we want to make sure that we're adding the stuff that we're taking out of the garden back in. And there's way more to this, but people who are like, oh, anything you take out of your garden, like all your garden scraps, put it back into your compost. If you're not bringing anything else besides just your garden scraps and then putting it back into your compost and then you're composting that year after year and putting that back in, that's a great start. But also, you're picking the stuff that has the nutrients and you're eating that. So unless you're also composting your poop, uh,
You're missing some
you
stuff.
yeah, you're missing some stuff. I am always like, how many different places can I get stuff from to
Right.
put into my compost so that I can make sure that I'm putting stuff back? So I know that I have a good balanced soil. I know that there's an abundance of nutrients. And I also don't have a monocrop system. I don't plant just one plant for a whole field. I have a whole bunch of different plants that are taking different things from different areas in the soil. Their roots touch, and those roots touch the roots of mushrooms and wild thing. Mushrooms talk. People call it the wood wide web. Um,
Ah!
certain mushroom varieties, their little mycelium roots, those white fingers we were talking about that you can find in the forest, one plant root will touch those mycelium and they'll be like, hey, I need some phosphorus over here. And the mycelium will go and find them some phosphorus and bring it back to them. That mushroom can then be like, here, I want you, little planty, to grow as big and tall as you possibly can so that when you die, I have more of you to eat. And so
Yeah.
they're just like, yeah, how can I help? How can I help you be a more delicious snack for me later? So the thing is, you don't have to rotate your crops if you have healthy soil, but that's a big if. And the reality is, again, going back to what I said about the reason any of this works in the first place is if you have healthy soil, you're going to have pest and disease resistant plants.
Mhm.
So potato blight,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
all of those things, they live in the soil. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's the idea is that you don't have plants that are rotting in the same place with all of those diseases. But the thing is, you don't have to worry about the diseases if your soil is healthy. Like your plant is going to be able to recover from the initial thing. And actually, that all leads me to the one tip if you're going to boil any of this stuff down to anything. The one best tip I have for maximizing your garden harvest is, especially if you're buying plants, you're buying starts or whatever, it's so exciting early in the season. It's like, oh my gosh, the snow just melted. I cannot wait to get outside and start my garden. Wait, wait until like 2 or 3 weeks after that earliest date for planting to put your stuff in the air. I don't know. Sometimes I'm a horrible person. And like I used to on the first sunny day of the spring, I would go and sit in the Home Depot parking lot and I would watch all these people come out with their little tomato
You're
plants, all
sick.
excited to go plant them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're gonna be right back here in
Mhm.
2 months
Mhm.
after these little tomatoes that you planted way too early die off or from disease or rot. Because the reality is, planting, even if you have mostly crappy soil, no pun intended, all the pun. If you have poor soil to plant in, the sun is a real powerful thing, my friends. And so waiting until a little bit later in the season to plant, your plants will have such a bigger head start than if you tried to eke things along
Yeah.
too early in the season, especially, I mean, like money's one thing, but boy, howdy, our time is limited. If you miraculously let your tomato seedlings from seeds start and, baby them along, don't plant them in March.
Oh my God, I know. Last year I had a total seed fail on all my tomatoes, which means that I didn't plant them out until mid to late May, and it didn't matter. I literally harvested tomatoes the week before Thanksgiving. Healthy,
Yeah.
big, huge tomatoes. And I feel like, especially with warm weather crops, man, just don't rush it.
Just wait.
Yeah. Really quickly, last thing. So if we're trying to have that healthy soil, and let's say you have raised beds, you start your raised bed and you've got wood chips and you've got cardboard, the leaves, and maybe you got some bag soil and you've got some cow manure in there. How to continue to keep that healthy balance as you go forward if you're working in a small, let's say, one raised bed area, and maybe you don't have the space to make your own compost.
Yeah. If you don't have the space for your own compost, if you do have the space to literally dig a trench, like either in the garden pathway by your raised bed or even in the middle of your raised bed, because think about how big your plants are going to get. They're going to get bigger than you think. You can literally put a little trench in your garden and put your compost scraps, like your garden scraps and everything, like right in that. And then just cover it right back up with mulch or leaves or wood chips or whatever, like whatever mulch means to you, straw. You can literally just have an active compost pile going in a garden trench in your garden all the time. So you're constantly adding to it. If you don't have the ability to have a huge compost pile, doing the trench system is a great way to do it. I've done this in a couple garden beds where I take a PVC pipe and drill a bunch of holes in it. And then I have like a little lid for it. And I literally just put stuff into the PVC pipe. If I toss a bunch of goat poop or a handful of spent lettuce or something in that, then I'll just put a little sprinkle of sawdust on top, put the lid back on, leave it be. And there you go. You're creating your own little
compost.
compost system.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh.
There's like 7 questions left.
Yeah.
That's all right.
We're going to do
Well,
that
that
another
just means we
time.
get to talk again.
We would absolutely love to. I really do hope that people go and check out your stuff. Like really dive into, what we just touched on today.
We said this earlier, that social media, it's got so many pros and so many cons, and sometimes you're trying to get information and you stumble on somebody who maybe not be giving the right information because they're not reading organic chemistry books and they're not living necessarily the lifestyle they project to live, or and sometimes we're just all wrong. I mean, I'm not saying everything I've ever said has been right. I thought it was right at the time and then I learned something different. But,
shoot, I've been wrong so many times publicly.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, is that you are willing to say that and you're willing to do the learning. I think, just a really great resource. So thank you again. And we're sorry that we kept your kids crying and starving.
I know. Oh my God, they get milked at
Goat
11.
kids, just to be clear. No, we're an hour earlier though. I
always
still have
forget.
45 minutes till I need to milk those.
Sweet little babies.
We didn't hurt the kids.
No, this was awesome and such a wealth of knowledge. We cannot thank you enough, Anne. I mean, I didn't even ask about your Dahlia competition with your dad, but we'll just leave it till next time.
Oh, we'll get there. This is
okay, good.
Because boy howdy have I spanked him the last couple of years. And I'm very happy to report that. Yeah, we'll talk about that. And also I'm sorry too, because like literally here I am talking about vegetables the whole time because that's what's on my mind.
That's the thing, is that we have vegetable gardens, we have flower gardens. We are fascinated with all of it.
All intertwined. Yeah. I know you were a veggie girl, and so we wanted to hear about that. So God, such great info.
Also, did you know that dahlias, once you have healthy soil in this climate, your dahlias actually become a noxious weed, and then you find out that dahlias can actually be eaten, and you have so many extra tubers that you're literally pulling out wheelbarrows of them and feeding them to your animals. That's where we want to get you to.
Okay.
Deal.
Okay.
It's a deal, girlfriend.
It's a dealia.
It's a deal.
Oh, you're one punny mother.
Thank you, Anne, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Let's go grow, baby.
Let's go grow.
We love hearing from our listeners. Have a question, tip, or story to share? Send it our way at tips@fosteringblooms.com, and we may feature it in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed today's episode of Fostering Blooms, please remember to follow and rate the podcast. Your support helps us reach more gardeners and bloom enthusiasts like you.